Situation's become completely untenable. What we've got is a Home Secretary who is stoking up division at a time when the thing we need most in this country is some unity. We're seeing rising anti-Semitism, rising Islamophobia. We need to keep the situation calm and reassure people rather than talking about hate marches and what the police should be doing and interfering. And rather than supporting the police and helping them do their job, interfering and making it more difficult, I don't think Rishi Sunak's got much choice in this. I think Suella Braverman has to go because the whole thing has become untenable.
Stephen, coming to you first, difficult situation on Monday morning for the Prime Minister. Of course, the Home Secretary whipped up tensions on Friday by accusing the police of bias in a Times article. Now she's praising the police. Does she stay or does she go on Monday?
Well, that's for the Prime Minister to decide. I think there are 3 or 4 things that are quite important coming out of this weekend. First of all, the violence we saw on the streets of London yesterday is unacceptable and disgraceful. Both the EDL at the Cenotaph and also some of the pro-Palestinian some factions in that march, in terms of some of the racism and the anti-Semitism we saw. They disrespect and dishonour the current military, the serving military, and those who gave their lives. I think it's really important that governments and police work together, and the governments recognise it's not for them to tell the police how to operationally act. And I think there has been some concern this week amongst a lot of people that was a line that was being very close to being crossed. I guess that the Prime Minister made it clear he didn't necessarily support all the remarks that were made last week. So this could be quite a difficult morning tomorrow in that regard. I think that what you do have to say is that the police did an extraordinarily good job yesterday. And now we want to make sure that they get the support they require in the future if there are going to be future marches on the streets of London, which there will be at various times, but in the very near future as well.
Ruth Jones for Labour, does it help Labour's cause if the Prime Minister sacks the Home Secretary tomorrow?
It doesn't make any difference to us. I mean, they're dysfunctional as a pair anyway. We can see that. I mean, I was in the chamber this week and I was sat across from them and I could see the body language between the two of them is quite interesting. They don't get on. I think a dysfunctional relationship is what they've got there. And what he does, I think he's in a no-win situation, because if he sacks her, that stokes up her rhetoric. And if he doesn't sack her, then she may well resign of her own accord anyway. But really, as far as the Labour Party is concerned, Rishi just shows weak leadership yet again, that, he can't make a decision on these things.
Christine Jardine from the Lib Dems. What does the PM... Has he got a choice, essentially, tomorrow? Does he lose either way if he sacks her or he keeps her?
Well, the situation's become completely untenable. What we've got is a Home Secretary who is stoking up division at a time when the thing we need most in this country is some unity. We're seeing rising anti-Semitism, rising Islamophobia. We need to keep the situation calm and reassure people rather than talking about hate marches and what the police should be doing and interfering. And rather than supporting the police and helping them do their job, interfering and making it more difficult. I don't think Rishi Sunak's got much choice in this. I think Suella Braverman has to go because the whole thing has become untenable and unacceptable. And what we're hearing from her all the time is just hyperbole, rhetoric that rampens it up, emboldens the mob, as we've seen this weekend in London. And that shouldn't have any place in our politics at any time, but particularly at the moment when what we need are calm heads, clear thinking and reassurance for people in what is yet another crisis that we're facing. And this time, people are horrified by what's happening in the Middle East, quite rightly.
Did they get things, now you can look back a little bit retrospectively on what happened with both the counter-protesters and the pro-Palestinian march, because we've seen the Met Police release a list of suspects they want to speak with over chants and placards, posters that we didn't know about 24 hours ago. How would you rate how the police did?
Well, having just started your programme by saying that politicians shouldn't tell the police how operationally to do their job, I'm not going to get into too much into that, other than to say I think Nadine is absolutely right that it's the role of governments and certainly Home Secretaries to support the police. And I think that in exceptionally difficult circumstances, they appear to have done a really excellent job in a number of cases. They will want to look at how they conducted operations yesterday to check whether there are things that they would wish to do differently in the future. And they are right to use all the channels to identify some of the people who had, frankly, despicable anti-Semitic remarks. And it plays into, I think, the fact that, quite rightly, as the Dean said, politicians need to be really careful of how they use language, because it can inflame and it can become incendiary. And that clearly may well have had an impact yesterday. And I think that the police probably found their job to be slightly more difficult because of that.
Hang on, Stephen. So you're saying what the Home Secretary said, you're admitting that they found their job more difficult because of what she said on Friday?
What I said is that I think that, if you've got to be really careful about how you use language in these very sensitive circumstances, and I think politicians should be careful about language in all circumstances, but in these very different, these are some of the remarks were definitely, I guess I use the word a moment ago, incendiary, and I think that that really is unhelpful.
Ruth Jones, can we come to you on this? I mean, how do you see how the police dealt with the weekend, considering what the potential pressure, I suppose, they were put on Friday when they were accused of potential bias?
I think Suella put the police as a whole across the UK in a really difficult position. The chief constables have a hard enough job as is. They walk a very fine line, keeping public order, keeping people safe, making sure people have the right to peaceful protest. So they do have to make some difficult decisions. And I think, credit to the Met, they made some really good decisions after her incendiary words, talking about hate marches and things like that. That is so unhelpful. And I do not think anybody in her position should be using that sort of language. It's really not acceptable. I talked to our local chief constable here in Gwent today at our Remembrance Sunday services.
Yes.
She was really, she was very supportive. Obviously, it went, as well as could be expected considering. But, when you've got the far right turning up at the Senator, I'm sorry, that is just not acceptable.
Well, Christine Jardine, just to come to you on this, I mean, did the police get things right? When you kind of look on 24 hours on and you still see these video clips of anti-Semitic chants, you see all the placards, not just one or two, but many of them, people as well as the counter-protests being holed up, 150 people firing fireworks at police later on in the night. Did they get it right yesterday?
I think the police were in a very difficult position yesterday, and they need to be commended for the sort of professional and brave way they dealt with things in challenging circumstances that were made more difficult by, as we've already said, the Home Secretary. And I think there are serious questions that have to be asked about her ability to continue in that position. I mean, because of this primarily, but also the comments she made about living in a tent being a lifestyle choice. I mean, really, that's just appalling. And of course, we have the Rwanda ruling on Wednesday. But I do think that the police, in a very difficult position, did well and have to be commended for getting on with the job. And like Stephen said, it's not our job to tell the police how to do their job. It's our job to support them. And the fact that they were put in this position by the Home Secretary is, I think, unforgivable. And I really think she has, not only does Suella Braverman have serious questions to answer about this, but I think the Prime Minister needs now to be seen to take some leadership, because you cannot just go on with a situation where you have a senior member of the cabinet who just seems to blithely carry on doing their own thing rather than following collective responsibility and following the leadership. And I think Rishi Sunak really needs to stand up now and do something about this and show clear leadership to the country in a way that we need and we haven't always seen from him.
Well, it looks like the number 10 diary has been partially cleared tomorrow morning, prompting some rumours of a reshuffle. So we'll keep an eye on that. We've got a great MP panel with us. If you're just joining us on Times Radio this evening, Stephen Hammond, Conservative MP for Wimbledon, Ruth Jones for Labour, Christine Jardine for Lib Dems, and Nadine Batchelor Hunt from Politics Home. Stay with us, because next we are going to be talking about the Rwanda scheme, because we expect a decision on it this coming Wednesday. The Rwanda policy, how much of your government's success on migration rests on this all working out for you, Stephen, on Wednesday?
Well, certainly the government has played a lot of store on making sure that we stop illegal immigration, and the processing of people in Rwanda is one part of that. I think that, my concern about this scheme is actually, is it going to be effective? And I really want to see more reassurance on that point. Where I think the government has done a study to do a really quite good job in illegal immigration, and we need to make sure we don't confuse people coming illegally, people coming for economic migrancy who we want to be here, and refuge and asylum. We need to be making absolutely clear that if people are coming here seeking refuge and asylum, they will still be welcome, as they have always been in the United Kingdom. And we also need to be clear we shouldn't confuse economic migrancy and illegal immigration. So I see Rwanda as one part of it if it works, and I think it might work, but I'd like to be more reassured that actually it will work. And the whole point of it is it's supposed to process people more quickly. Where I think the government's done a good job, and particularly Robert Jenrick, signing a deal with Albania recently, some of the work that the Prime Minister has done with France in terms of looking at people coming through the continent who are probably moving illegally. And also looking at whether or not the safe list, where people, if you're applying for asylum from those countries, really should be, that they don't need to apply for asylum because they wouldn't be under threat of persecution in those countries. Whether or not we need to increase that white list, safe list, call it whatever you like, more. Yeah. I think those are the keys to getting this right as well.
Well, it looks like that safe list might be expanded if Rwanda doesn't work out for the Conservatives, for the government on Wednesday. Ruth Jones for Labour. Labour's in a bit of a tricky position, aren't they, on this? Because if you look at the latest ONS survey on Rwanda that I've got in front of me, there are more people in the UK, according to the survey, who are in favour of the Rwanda policy than those who oppose it. But Labour say no matter what happens, we'll scrap it if we get into power.
I think there is no evidence that the Rwanda scheme will actually work. There's been a lot of rhetoric about this and millions of pounds spent on it.
But people seem to like it, Ruth.
Yeah, but they don't. You can like an idea, but if it doesn't actually work, there's no point, is there? And the only person who's actually been to Rwanda so far is Suella Braverman. So it's just a bit bizarre that we're talking about the scheme. We'll wait until the Supreme Court ruling, obviously on Wednesday. But if they throw it out, what's Rishi going to do? What's Suella going to do? It's back to the drawing board, surely. There, we need to be looking at the reasons why people are coming to our country. We need to make sure that we have processes in place so that they can be processed quickly and effectively. Because part of the problem is any asylum claims now are taking years to be processed. We need more staff to be dealing with this and making sure that we improve the time that we get to make a decision on these things. People shouldn't have to be waiting years and years for decisions.
Christine Jardine from the Lib Dems, what does the government do if this fails for them on Wednesday? And the reason I ask is because they've not really been shouting, have they, from the rooftops about some of the successes that they've had. I mean, that deal with Albania has essentially stopped Albanians crossing the channel because they've got an immediate return scheme. So should they expand that? What would happen in the case of it failing on Wednesday?
Well, the thing is, this government doesn't have a workable policy. Rwanda is unworkable. It's expensive. It's astonishingly expensive, actually. And, it would only, see a handful of asylum seekers returned. What this government needs to do, what any government needs to do, whoever wins the next general election, is look at what is causing the problem. And what's causing the problem is that people are seeking asylum. Now, you go to where the root of the problem is and you address it there. And when we cut back on international aid, when we stop going into countries and supporting people there, then that is when they start looking to come to this country. There's no deterrent in the Rwanda policy. There's no deterrent in anything they're doing. And there's also no reason for people to stay in the country. Now, I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago with some people from Commonwealth countries, some representatives, and they were talking about what they would like to see is Britain take a lead in encouraging economic development in the countries where people are fleeing from. That way, they will stay in those countries because they will not feel the need. Stephen's talking about economic migration. Well, help the economies in the countries that they're coming from. But remember, most of these people are asylum seekers, and they have genuine reasons for fleeing with little more than what they're standing up in. And like Ruth said, it is taking years to process the claims. And the Rwanda policy doesn't help them, and it doesn't help the government because it would only send back a handful of people, and it doesn't deter people from trying to come across the channel in boats, risk their lives in the worst of weather. We need a sensible, humane, forward-looking immigration policy which deals with the problem at its root and provides safe legal routes for people. What we've got at the moment is just a mess.
Yeah. Lots of you getting in contact with us, listening to our MP panel tonight. Lisa in Wimbledon, I don't know if you know her, Stephen. Why do you only have a one-sided discussion regarding Suella? Lots of us in the UK love Suella and her politics, says Lisa. This one from Sam in Brecon, the Home Secretary and protest marches as an example of how skewed our media has become. You're discussing Suella Braverman and protesters, as well as slogans and chants, instead of the bombing, shooting and death and mayhem inflicted on people in Gaza. Well, this one from Chris in Newbury. I don't know if it's Chris Newbury or Chris in Newbury. The police are biased in the way they police. We know it. And it was a hate march. Are people chanting for the destruction of Israel peace protesters? Keep them coming in 87222. Start your message with the word Times. You can email studio@times.radio. Our panel will be with us until 6 o'clock tonight. Ruth, just to come back on what we were talking about there, and Stephen, I'll bring you in as well. Germany, Italy, Austria and Denmark are all now looking at their own version of the Rwanda scheme, saying they want to copy Britain in some way if it's successful. Does that not mean there is a deterrence in it if many other places in Europe are also looking at doing it, Ruth?
I mean, it's difficult to know if there's a deterrent because the system's not up and running. So we're talking about a hypothetical situation here. Many people, and certainly human rights groups, are very anxious about the Rwanda situation because we know that Rwanda takes a very hard line on people who may be gay. And, you know, are we sending people there who are going to be persecuted in this country? We need to look at it very, very carefully. And I think we'll just wait till the Supreme Court makes a decision one way or the other. You know, we should be looking at our own country and making sure we process people within our own country, also working with Europe, because let's be honest, the border between us and France is very narrow. We should be talking to them to make sure that we actually have a workable relationship with them to see why people are coming across the channel. You know, could they stay in Europe, or, you know, there are other options, but we need to have that dialogue. And at the moment, there's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of shouting, but not much communication. Is
that what we're going to see, Stephen? More deals with different countries, essentially, if this fails on Wednesday?
Well, I think we've seen them all already. As I say, the Rwanda scheme is part of the policy the government set out. It's interesting that other countries are looking at it as well. As I said to you a moment ago, I want to be convinced it's workable. But the key point is processing.
You don't seem sure.
I think where we also must be clear, though, is let's not confuse what this is trying to stop, which is illegal migration, which is not the same as helping countries with economic development or making sure that we offer refugee sanctuaries to refugees. Most of the people that are causing the problem,
we're not doing that.
Well, most of the people who are causing the problem are not people from those countries. They're essentially young men in large quantities from countries like Albania. So the Albania deal is extremely important to the part of to sorting out part of the process. And there are a number of things that will need to be done here, but that's one of them. And doing more of those types of deals, and the deal that the Rishi Sunak did with the French, all are having an impact on reducing the number of illegal migrants crossing the channel.